think I would take this over an Artura. This is the new Aston Martin Vantage, and the brand's base model now makes 656 horsepower, 590 pound-feet, and yes, it's just all still straight to the rear wheels. This thing has been a heap of fun today, and after a whole morning of it on the circuit, I am out on the roads of southern Spain with naught but a route and a good 2 hours to myself. Remember as a kid, the supercars are always the bee's knees. It's just all you wanted was McLarens to go fast and do all this stuff. Well, I've spent some time in McLarens, and now I'm just in what's supposed to be sort of a touring sports car. And you know what? I think I like the little sports car more. This isn't a slow car fast thing, of course. No, not with that kind of power. No, acceleration to 100, you're looking at 3.5 seconds in this thing. Power is up 30% from last year. Torque output is a further 15, and that's from basically the same engine, however heavily reworked. That engine, of course, is the 4-liter twin-turbo AMG M177. That engine, which was introduced in the vulnerable previous gen C63 AMG, has always been a muscular bit of fun. Placing its turbochargers in between its 90-degree banks, it's really sharply responsive, and paired up with a silly exhaust, it's a raucous bit of fun too. What's interesting though is that all of that power isn't really the star of the show. No, it just seems to exist in service to this, a wonderful, comfortable actually, steering wheel, and what a delight it is to play with. Sorry, I know I'm supposed to be doing work and like paying attention to the camera right now, but these roads are really fucking good, and this car is so much fun! Whew. Okay, composing myself. Yes, so the Aston Martin is a car that's capable of a lot of things. I've learned a whole bunch of technical things about it. I've done a lot of homework, and somehow all of it's just sort of left my head right now. You see, Aston has done a really good job of this. My expectations weren't high coming into this. Yeah, that AMG powertrain makes a lot of power, and it's gargly and fun in the E63. I've had my fun with this setup before. Less exciting too is that they've just used the ZF 8-speed automatic transmission in this thing. That's the same trans that's in absolutely everything. It's a good trans, but I mean, it's a Durango trans, it's an F-type trans, it's in everything. But I don't care. No, I'm just having fun chucking this thing about. You see, the Vantage has evolved pretty significantly from what was introduced 7 years ago. This updated generation is really heavy on the tech, but without really feeling much like it at all. It just feels happy. It's plenty clever, don't get me wrong. I've spent all morning, in fact, probing Aston engineers about what makes this thing tick. But once you get it going, it just feels kind of dumb in the best and actually most proficient way. You see, the big news here really is handling, and it's not just playfulness, it is genuine ability. Star of the show, telemetry. There's a new Bosch system in town, and my god, the supercar manufacturers are having fun with it. Instead of the usual 3-axis, that's pitch, roll, and yaw, this thing now also measures when the car lurches upwards, it feels when it surges forward and back, and it feels when it's wanting to lean in addition to yaw. What that means is that Aston is able to feed a whole lot more data into all of the clever computers, managing the brakes, the traction control, the throttle response, all of it. It's doing so much, but in a refreshing departure from what I've grown used to in the Germans, it doesn't feel like it. No, this isn't an antiseptic 911. This isn't boring at all. There's a lot that makes it this way, but I think it can really just be distilled to one clever little function. This thing has a variable traction control setting, which isn't necessarily anything new, but it's just really accessible whenever you want it. You just hold a button for a certain amount of time and push it again. Then this big, hefty, really nicely detanted, by the way, knob in the middle runs you through 10 levels of traction assistance, ranging from full to not. As I have experienced on the track, not can be quite slippery. And yet, for a vehicle with all of this power, it's actually not that scary. The Vantage here is really well set up. Aston is very proud to emphasize their 50-50 weight distribution. That means that you don't get a pendulum effect like a 911 with its weight to the rear, nor do you get a hefty plowing effect like you might in something like the Cadillac Blackwing I was in a little while ago. Instead, you just get really neutral handling. Combined with that electronically controlled diff out back, and of course this fun little knob in the middle, you can use the right pedal and its predictable and abundant power to steer the car as much as you would like. As for the steering itself, that's also really something unusual and special. You see, this is a modern car. It's got electric power assisted steering, but it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like ass. It's just nice. This feels direct. This feels the way steering is meant to. Aston has removed the vibration damper from halfway down the line there, so it is an uninterrupted link with the steering rack. The E-Pass does start to weigh things artificially as you get higher into the speeds for stability, which isn't my favorite, but by and large, it's a relatively inoffensive system and a really welcome improvement just for the sports car segment in general. Also pleasant is the braking. We still have a traditional master servo up here, and depending on whether you fit the steel or the carbon ceramic brakes, you actually get a different tune to make sure that it feels bitey and grippy right up there at the top. Bitey and grippy at first, I should say. These brakes have a lot of leeway. They have been impressive today. On the track, these cars were swapping drivers back and forth for 2 full hours. And with the exception of a pause to refuel because we'd been going through so much gas, the cars didn't really complain. With that being said, stand on the brakes at the end of the straightaway on your 15th minute or so, and they do kind of go a little softer than you might expect. This caught a few of us off guard, and there's still plenty of stopping power in there. These things, 410 front with the steels, 400 mil with the carbon ceramics, 360 mil rears. There's a lot of rotor in here, but that's also a lot of heat, and from a car that weighs dry 1,650 kilograms, they're still working hard. Wrapped around those then and absorbing quite a lot of heat are Pilot Sports, in this case the new generation Sport S5. Those wrap around 21-inch forged aluminum wheels. You're looking at 275 section front, 315 rear, the same as on the DB12. It's a really grippy setup, and when you match that with this car's improvements in stability and particularly rigidity, it holds so well. Aston Martin touts that there's 12% less understeer in this thing, and that the understeer follows a more linear and predictable curve. That is quite believable because this thing feels so square, even if you drive it like a ham. That rigidity is some 30% between the rear towers, and thanks to a bunch of reconfiguration up front, the cross bracing up there does the same magic. It's a short little car on a short little wheelbase, and thanks to its tourable softness, it's not quite as go-kart as the Ferrari 296, but it's pretty friggin' solid. Then of course, there's just how squat the Vantage is. It is now 30 millimeters wider, 15 mil wider track. It is a broader, more confidently stanced car, and it must be noted that Aston has made a point of making sure that it does this without looking bulbous or heavy. This is where updates to the design really come in here, because not only is this thing pretty, but if you actually pay close attention to the detail on it, there's a lot that's really thoughtful here, and honestly, really refreshing. Aston's style strategy over this past decade has been polarizing for some fans, but they seem to have found something a little more graceful now. So then, a very dynamic car, a very controllable car, an all-around enjoyable car, not a supercar. So why do I say I would take this over the Artura? You see, back when I drove the Artura here in southern Spain, I was exhausted, and I delighted in how comfortable it was when I was ferrying myself back and forth from the circuit. Driven harder though, the Artura squats up and feels very serious, very uncompromising. And rightly so. It's a carbon monocoque supercar with something to prove with that hybridized V6. This isn't bothering with any of that fuss or pretense. And no, it's just an aluminum sports car chassis. This is a GT adjacent product, if anything. With that comes an absence of apparent concern for lap times or actual serious heavy metrics. And that's really quite welcome, because we already know we can make fast cars. There are loads of them. Not every car, though, lets you play, and especially not with the sort of confidence that I'm feeling here. As we pick up more and more speeds along these rather Welsh in places feeling roads, this thing is hopping and skipping about. I've got it in sport mode. It's not full-on stiff, and that's not what you want, because you want to keep the wheels down on the ground. And it's plush, but it's also really firm. It's very supportive. I have not felt my body move one little bit. More than that, as it's hopped and skipped about, I've not felt like it was so stiff and rigid and square that it wouldn't be able to adapt and meet the road surface below. No, instead, this thing just molds itself to what it feels. It reads those 6-axis sensor inputs, and it just makes it do all of the stuff. Yeah, it's really clever, and despite all of that, I still get to feel like the driver. This is a capable car. This is a malleable car. It's a handsome car. It's a comfortable car. And you know what? It's an engaging car. In this era, that alone should be all the praise that it needs. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. I'm gonna stop trying to record this stuff right now. You can find the rest in writing, because